Okay, we'll go ahead and jump into it. So again, today, no more blind spots. We're going to talk about compliance across every interaction, and we'll have a little fun with some of this as well. And I'll be happy to answer questions when we get through the presentation. We'll stop and see what questions you might have. But again, appreciate you being here, and we'll go ahead and jump into things. So just a couple of things I thought we should cover right out of the gate are some compliance and certifications that you may see on certain companies' websites, or you may hear about when you're talking about security. And I've picked these four because they're pretty common and sort of expected within a lot of technology solutions. And when IT is looking at a particular application that you might want to use, or a SaaS application, or really any technology in the contact center, especially if it's exposed to conversations that are occurring between agents and customers, some of these would be applicable certainly for those types of solutions. And Proponisi, which I'm the senior partner at Proponisi, and we have a SaaS application that does a lot of things for contact centers, from coaching, engagement, post-contact surveys, compliance-related things as it relates to using AI for QA and for post-interaction note summaries. And that'll be something I'll be referring to a lot today, is that particular feature that we have. But we'd love to find time to show you a full demo of the application. But we'll start with the first one, NIST, and specifically, I'm talking about NIST 853. This is a compliance that we have. It's a U.S. federal framework. If you've ever heard of FedRAMP, or FedRAMP mentioned, NIST 853 shares a lot of the same policies and controls that FedRAMP has. FedRAMP has just a different layer where the federal government has some standardization of certain ways to control those policies. But again, that's one of the policies we have that does protect data just in general, as well as personally identifiable data, or healthcare data, that type of data as well. And then there's HIPAA, which is sort of a privacy law related to the security of healthcare information, so that you can be protected when you're discussing, obviously, personal matters related to a medical condition that you might have, or care that you might need. And this makes sure that that data is protected, and we're also HIPAA compliant. And then PCI is the payment card industry data security standard, which really relates to organizations who have financial transactions that are recurring. If you're taking payments from customers for your services, or processing payments when they call in, and storing that data, that's where PCI comes into place to make sure that data is secure and not vulnerable to breaches where someone could get that information. This is when you might hear a lot about when there's stories when there is a breach, and you might be notified if your credit card information or your bank information was it potentially at risk or vulnerable, if you've ever seen that happen. But PCI is to prevent that. We're also PCI compliant, and we've just done that as an extra layer of security. We don't process or store any credit card or financial information, but because of our AI quality assurance component, where the AI can measure and evaluate 100% of your calls, depending on the technology you're using, we might be exposed to some of that information, but we're compliant by doing real-time redaction, which I'll talk about in a minute. And again, we're not storing any of that data. And then finally, SOC 2 is something we just completed, but that's basically where a third-party auditor, an actual CPA, comes in and provides an audit of these policies and procedures and writes up a report. And then all of these things are available to our clients where they can see our certifications or request access to the reports, et cetera. So those are sort of the key components, compliance related things that I'll be discussing today. There are other compliance policies that you may be familiar with, but I at least wanted to mention these four. So, and just before I completely jump in, I do have just a kind of an interesting story related to compliance that happened to TJ Maxx. And basically, you may have seen this in the news, but they suffered a breach that affected 94 million of their customers. And what happened was basically after that happened, like within a few months, the manager at one of their stores changed the login protocol so employees could access company servers with blank passwords. I guess the 94 million customer breach that happened a few months earlier, they just weren't thinking about that and maybe thought having these blank passwords would reduce the amount of forgotten password requests that maybe are coming into IT, or maybe they thought that would be more efficient, not having to remember a password and employees could work faster. But the manager also put sticky notes on different employees' workstations and computers that had the login credentials as well. So now it's a blank password and you've got the credentials written on a sticky note. And there was an employee who brought this to attention of management, and unfortunately, the way this story ends is the employee who raised the concerns actually got fired for disclosing confidential information, not the manager who created the violations, but the employee that tried to stop them. So sort of a sad tale, but we'll look at some of the real world risks and how to avoid those risks here as we continue. So when you just look at different components, there recently was a $20 million fine for DNC violations, which is the do not call list that it's the National Do Not Call Registry. And so if an organization is calling those numbers, and they're on the do not call list, then the organization that's making those calls can be fined. Another one is the $7.4 million for recording without consent, happened recently in California. Most contact centers are, protected by automating that process, where in your IVR, when it's time to transfer the call to an agent, you're probably playing a recording that's saying, your call may be recorded for quality purposes, and it's, having that consent by allowing the customer to hear that, and then if they continue on with the call. Otherwise, some organizations might still be just having the agent, read that consent right out of the gate as part of their greeting. DirecTV had a do not, another kind of do not call list that they were responsible for, and that's a Telephone Consumer Protection Act, but that was a $17 million settlement for 7 million unwanted calls. And again, there's also, things we could go on and on about. I thought I'd mention this. It's really not relevant to the discussion, but as I was looking up some of the recent violations related to security, I thought this was pretty interesting, and you can look it up, that the Boers had food safety violations. They came under some scrutiny, and during that, the company admitted that the company's so secretive, even the CFO admits nobody knows who the CEO is. So that could be a challenge, I think, when you don't even know who the CFO is, or the CFO doesn't know who the CEO is. You definitely have a blind spot related to accountability and security. So kind of strange. I wonder who the CEO is. And if you know, let me know in the chat. But today, you know, a lot of fines for these do not call, but also vendors like Proponisi might be one of your vendors, can also create a liability, and we'll talk about that. And then regulators are beginning to look at not just, you know, the voice channel, which is what it's been for years and years, until, you know, we see the emergence of omni-channel and these new channels coming in like chat or email channels. So it's not just a matter of what's happening in a call center or related to calls. It's what's happening in omni-channel and across multiple channels. And I'll talk a little bit today about how Proponisi can create, you know, an audit ready record for every interaction without adding any kind of manual QA burden. So instead of, you know, digging through random calls when an auditor shows up and you're pulling up every call, trying to find, you know, different details that they're looking for, you can actually pull up a report that shows, you know, how every call with disclosures were checked and confirmed, and that all the compliance related points of the conversation that the agent needs to be careful of, you'd be able to be tracking that and showing evidence of how you're tracking it and how you're coaching or taking action on it, which is another thing Proponisi helps with. Should there be something that slips through the cracks and you know, creates a compliance related issue. So just a couple of myth busting. You know, one myth is our IVR handles all disclosures, but really, if there's any kind of agent, you know, handled calls where maybe they're doing callbacks, maybe there's transfers happening, and again, you know, those IVR disclosures aren't working in other channels like email or chat. And then vendors handle their own compliance. The reality is you still remain responsible. So, you know, with Proponisi, if you're working with us, part of that would be seeing how we handle our compliance, requesting, you know, the reports or certifications or recent scans that we're doing to prove that compliance, and, you know, making sure you're managing vendors that are exposed to your data in a way that you've got a good partnership and, you know, can sleep well at night knowing they're taking care of you and your security needs and your customers' data, and that they can prove that they are. And, you know, monitoring or QA monitoring means more micromanaging is another myth. And it's really, you know, more about spotting patterns and giving targeted feedback and coaching, so that instead of it being something you're micromanaging, you really can find what are the areas, you know, for opportunities to improve a particular employee, and not just use a shotgun approach to everyone, but give people the feedback that's relevant to them, that helps improve their compliance ratings as well. So you can kind of think of it that, well, and perfect compliance kills productivity. The reality is smart compliance improves both. I mean, it's really compliance through AI QA can really become a support tool and a growth development tool for your employees, not a micromanagement tool. We'll talk a little bit more, with manual QA or legacy QA, as we call it, which is the QA that's been around, for the last 20 plus years, where in most cases you're going in and monitoring maybe 3% of calls with staff. And I mean, that was a good process when that was the only process. It obviously didn't make sense to hire enough people to evaluate a large percentage of every employee's call. So it really became sort of a spot check process where you're able to do maybe 3%. And you really can't coach people accurately. It's sort of like saying a football coach could, watch 3% of the game and be an effective coach. You've got to kind of be involved in the whole scenario and how a person performs through the entire game in the football metaphor. The same thing is true in a contact center. It's like when you're doing that 3%, did you happen to find some of the days where the agent just had a bad day or something was going wrong at home, and the other 97% of their calls were perfect? There's just not a great way to find where true skill gaps are with an employee with such a light amount of evaluations. So again, with AI and with Proponisi's AI QA tool, every call, chat, email, every one of these interactions is monitored for compliance behaviors and obviously quality. And the result of that is you spend a lot less time, looking for someone doing something wrong, which is obviously demotivating to an employee. You're actually finding, just what are some opportunities for improvement, and you're spending more time with data that helps you coach agents rather than hunting for those violations and, focusing only on that. So it really does free up supervisors to become more of a coach with a balanced message of, encouragement and talking about what's going well as making sure these urgent compliance issues, should an agent be struggling with those, that those get addressed as well. And it kind of transforms them from being, a traffic cop waiting to write tickets versus someone who's, trying to help you and help you improve and protect the customer, et cetera, et cetera. So moving along, some of the risks today that happen is agent authentication shortcuts are under pressure. I mean, if you look just at the contact center over the last, 5 years, or really, there was a big change in 2020 that we've observed where potentially the move to at-home agents and people having to go at home because of COVID and not wanting to come back, and that disconnect of being, part of a team in person, seeing your, coworkers and friends, as well as, your manager and coaches. But for whatever reason, there became more and more pressure to just, sort of make sure your handle time is short, and try to not even do the post-interaction call notes after the call and wrap up anymore. Let's just try to do that while you're talking to the customer, and by the way, make sure you're treating them really well, but also make sure you're following all this compliance. And we see a lot of times that when you begin using AI QA, that's one thing you'll find is that authentication, like skipping date of birth or a security question, is something that an agent might skip because they see calls are on hold and they're just trying to move through calls as fast as they can, or through screen sharing or copy pasting when you're maybe trying to make notes or putting something into a Word document that you'll then come back and maybe that's sensitive data that you're copying and pasting, or outsource vendors where if you're working with a BPO, how are their agents handling those calls, and are there issues like I mentioned on the vendor side? The liability would still sit with you. And one of the things that Proponisi does is, we provide real-time alerts to any of your compliance-related checklists, and those can be delivered to you, as well as evidence from the actual call that points to the particular components that were a violation of the protocol, such as maybe not using 3 pieces of identification to authenticate the customer, or 2, or whatever your policies are. And so now you can be notified, and not just notified, but you can discover exactly where that took place. So what Proponisi actually does, we look at pattern recognition, where we start looking at reoccurring compliance drifts across agents or teams, and we'll notice, are there examples where the customer maybe has called several times, and we're escalating that to let you know that this is occurring, and that we don't want to repeat the same scenario where the customer is going to have to call back in by not doing authentication or giving incorrect information. So you would be able to be notified if that customer continues to call in or is having issues. And then in the call itself, we do intelligent redaction. So if we have Proponisi AIQA sort of listening in to the call during real time while the agent's talking to the customer, we will be transcribing the call so that you've got a record of the transcription, which is also where any evidence of compliance related issues, that's where it can pull the examples and details from the transcription to show where there was a particular issue, sort of the evidence collection piece. And while we're doing that, we're also redacting any of the PCI or PHI data, but we're using intelligent redaction, which I'll show you here in a second. And then we'll do predictive coaching through Proponisi, where, like I was mentioning, rather than someone maybe missing the authentication business rules and you not noticing that until you're listening to calls or going back and reviewing historical data or reports, Proponisi actually will be able to identify, is this a habit or is this starting to become a problem? So if maybe the third time the agent is having this issue, or the second time they're having an issue with authentication, not only could we send an alert to notify in real time, but Proponisi can take action and assign a micro training course reinforcing what the business rules are for the authentication process, and then follow up with that particular agent over the next week or two with little pop quizzes and coaching tips to continue to reinforce the key components of the authentication process, so that they actually, can learn and remember what they've been trained on. And then we see, improvement in that area once they've had that type of automated training. So it's really proactive in helping agents that just have a habit that looks like it's starting to form before that habit becomes a real problem. So, and this is an example of smart redaction when you're using Proponisi AI for QA. A lot of times, default redaction tools will just put, for credit cards, a bunch of asterisks and just use the word credit card. And we do some of that redaction if it's related to maybe a survey transcript, if someone, spoke some sort of information like that over the interaction. But when you're talking about the call transcripts, which is where you're able to do a lot of data analysis and uncover all kinds of details that are going on in the call, or running it through AI to extract, what types of calls are you getting, what call types are having the lowest QA scores. If you're trying to let AI read redacted transcripts, if it is just all asterisks, it's going to have a hard time verifying, what happened or looking at the logic behind certain business rules. So what we do is, instead of just, putting redaction or credit card redaction, we would put in there, partial redactions, or the identity would be, customer identity confirmed with partial social security number. So we would eliminate that from the transcript, but put in brackets that's what occurred, so that you've still got context without exposure to PII or PHI, like the billing address updated, zip code verified, would be in brackets instead of just, address redacted with asterisks. So then, whether it's you or machine learning that's reviewing these transcripts, you have there's context still available even with those things stripped out. Let's go ahead and go forward. So when we talk about this, the real key here is what, is an auditor looking for. And that's typically what would happen if you were, if you've had a violation, it was a result of an auditor or some information that was presented, and then an auditor has to come in and audit your system. This is sort of an auditor and a supervisor's wish list, a supervisor being sort of the first line of defense in coaching and developing staff to avoid these compliance-related issues. But, here's the list we would say that an auditor is looking for, and it's also on the supervisor's wish list, which is evidence across all channels, not just a lucky sample, and a trend analysis where you can see how adherence to the business rules or compliancy statements or whatever different parts of the equation fit your call scenarios, having those kind of details to see how they're improving. And like I mentioned, if an employee is not doing the proper greeting or authentication, and Proponisi takes proactive measures to address that, then you're able to see how did that micro training and then coaching improve that employee's compliance related issue that was a gap before. Has it remedied the gap? And you're able to see that through trending reports. Vendor oversight. We have a website that you can visit, and I'll just pull this up really quick to share with you. But an easy way, you can get information from a company is if you go to their website, they might have a trust center, or you could reach out to them. But Proponisi, we put a trust center that's available to you that shows all of our compliance, lets you see all of the policies in our framework, or even, drill down into particular details and see supporting document for, reports that have happened. So this is one thing, you can easily do in Proponisi, and you can even get down into the control level and search for various controls and drill down into those or request access to that. So I guess I'm just mentioning that as, transparency is key. So making sure the people that you're going to trust with your customers' data, that vendor can actually show that you can trust them and give you evidence of that. And then again, consistency, making sure these rules aren't just something for the call center, it's a contact center now. So are you handling these compliance related things and security protocols across all channels? And then Proponisi automates this so you don't have to build evidence manually, which is helpful. A couple of other things just to mention, traditional QA catches issues after they occur. Proponisi AIQA prevents issues by coaching in real time, being able to look at all the calls, and again, even avoiding one major violation offsets the cost of our platform and other tools. So I get better compliance drives higher customer trust and less rework for agents. And another thing to mention, I said let's talk about security, and hopefully that'll be a fun topic. But I mean, rarely are compliance related things a fun topic. But again, one of the things we try to do is make these things that can feel restrictive to an agent, where they have to say certain verbatim statements, or they have to say things in a certain order, or verify certain things. Most people like to have the freedom of just having a conversation and not worrying about those things. They can be stressful. So we do try to make them fun. So there's, compliance gamification that we can offer, where you could unlock badges and challenges and earn recognition based on, certain verification components or disclosures or, authentication requests or authorized user requests, et cetera. We even allow you to do this at the team level, or, let supervisors compete against other supervisors to handle this. So we definitely can work on making it sort of fun. And now you're not necessarily thinking, I don't want to violate one of these, procedures and get in trouble. It's more about, hey, I can, continue doing this and unlock achievements or points, or potentially have some sort of reward or contest in my call center organization that might actually get me excited about this. And then again, through the process, we're helping them not only be compliant, but help them become a better performer in terms of how they're recognized and, what types of gamification progress they can make by giving those automated coaching tips throughout the process. So, as we're wrapping up here, and then we'll have some time for questions, I think the question that matters to an organization, especially, probably a BPO out there, but also if, you have your own internal contact center and you have consumers or people can make a choice of doing business with you or one of your competitors, you have to ask yourself if your competitors' agents are compliant, strong, audit ready, coached daily by AI, how long before they outperform your team? So do you have that competitive advantage? Because more and more you see with with AI coming into play, and the public trust of AI, or just not even understanding or being aware of that technology, but knowing that technology is changing and things are more easy to access. You really do have the public thinking more and more about their data and how secure is their data, and there's more and more tools available to consumers to protect their data. So it's definitely, besides it being, potential fines and legal responsibilities, it is a customer experience component as we, progress more and more with various technology that's being introduced. But Proponisi ensures 100% visibility across every call, chat, and email. We have those audit-ready records without, the manual QA. And we still have manual QA where if you do have certain, processes that you want to evaluate, or certain groups that maybe are not in any kind of communication channel, but are doing something that you still need to have a manual review of, you can create those manual reviews within Proponisi to still supplement that piece. And then again, we're, offering you smarter coaching and, the ability to gamify things and, make things fun and kind of turn compliance into a positive reinforcement component. So again, we'd love to work with you, maybe do a little small example of how this process would work with your calls, so that you could, sort of get an idea of how it works and what it could do for you in terms of being compliant and just improving overall agent engagement and performance while addressing, and improving a tough challenge like all the compliance related, things that we have to be aware of.